Hello, I'm Anna Brown from Living Joyfully, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts Pamela Rickia and Erica Ellis. Hello to you both.
Hello.
Hi.
Before we get started, I want to encourage you to check out our shop where you can find books, courses, coaching, information about the Living Joyfully Network, including our new course for Pillars of Unschooling, where we explore 4 foundational ideas and paradigm shifts that can help you along your journey. So especially if it's new, and really if not, but especially if it's new, I think it's a good framework to kind of start and understand, oh, okay, these are some important paradigm shifts. The shop has resources and support for really every stage of your journey and different levels, whether you want some personalized attention with coaching, or if you want to work through some courses, or again, join the network, which gives you a community of people living all over the world that can just, it's so fun to see their lives and what's happening with their families. You can find the link in the show notes, or you can visit livingjoyfullyshop.com. So today, I'm very excited. We're going to be talking about the idea that people are different. And while it sounds simple, it is so layered, and not understanding it can definitely be a stumbling block in our relationships. And once you really embrace it, I feel like it becomes fun just noticing all the ways and finding, like, how can I apply this lens? So we're going to have a lot of fun talking about that today. I think it takes some of the mystery and frustration out of other people's behavior when we recognize, oh, this is a people are different thing. We tend to think everyone sees and experiences the world in the same way. And so when they don't, it can actually cause some friction. So I'm very excited to dive into this very broad topic with both of you. Erica, do you want to get us started?
I would love to. This might be one of my most favorite topics to talk about these days. And I'm just really excited to see what we are able to touch on today, while also knowing that there will be so much more that we won't even get to, because it is such a big and rich topic to explore once we start thinking about it. And so I really think that we started putting that people are different lens into words in the past few years because of some deep dives that we have kind of all done individually and kind of together, probably partly inspired by the deep conversations we have on the network around personalities and kind of learning about the different people there. And I think we can kind of, on a surface level say, people are different, and everyone would agree, like, well, yeah, of course, but the deeper stuff, like, no, people are really different, can take a while to wrap our heads around. And so, for example, like the way our brains work is different, and our personalities and temperaments are different. Of course, everyone has different past experiences and maybe past trauma that impacts what they do today. And so that contributes to our differences. Our go-to defense mechanisms and our reactions to things and all the beliefs we have about the world can just be so, so different. And that's not even to mention fun things like our interests and what lights us up, and our bodies and what makes our bodies feel good, our curiosity and what our curiosity leads us to. So, I mean, if you just start to think about putting all these different aspects of ourselves together into one complex human, like, it's no wonder that so many times we could feel like it's so hard to communicate, or it's hard to understand why other people are making such different decisions from what we would do. But it's just because we're all so different.
We're all so different. And I mean, to me, that is why, like, for me, I just love to keep coming back to this idea. Like you were saying, there's just so many layers to it. Like, introvert, extrovert, like, just to grab something that's pretty common for people to, oh yeah, they don't like going out as much. They like to be around people all the time. But when you just that lens on its own, when you bring it to any moment, it can help you understand it a little bit more, right? It can help you understand, like, why, like, what are they getting? Yes, they don't want to hang out in big crowds for long times. But oh yeah, also it's why, when they're at home with a smaller number of people, it's so energizing. Like, to see that lens in each moment helps you understand like, even when you're saying you love this thing, there's this activity out here, let's go. Oh, don't worry about it. We'll get you headphones and let's go, like that we can superficially, like maybe that would help. But people are different even within introverts. It's like layer, layer, layer. What helps them? What kinds of situations are worth it? Like all those pieces. So when you just start digging into that a little bit, like you were saying, that's one of the things that I found so interesting, because when we first came and I first started thinking about this stuff, like our kids making different choices than us would not make sense. Like, but A, B, C, like of course D,
Right.
and until you actually started to look at them as a human being, as a whole human being, understand that they are truly different from me, and understand that me reaching D as a conclusion and them reaching E as a conclusion are both absolutely
Yeah.
fundamentally true. Like D would work better for me and E would work better for them. So now how can we, work together and find an F that has enough of D and enough of E that we're all pretty happy with this plan, and off we go down the F path. But like just those pieces, and then like you were talking, layer after layer after layer, like there is just so much that makes up a human being that can be different from us. And it just helped me not be frustrated, not feeling like, oh, I need to explain this again because they must not be getting it, because it makes utter and complete sense to me.
Right. Right. I think that's what I love about it. And we get at it at different ways, but I feel like this is a really quick thing that comes to mind that pulls me to a place of curiosity. Because if I find myself feeling frustrated or like, why are they making that choice? Or if I start taking something personally about the way somebody's doing something, I can quickly go, wait a minute, is this a people or different thing? And I can just pause a second and give a little bit of space to bring curiosity to it. Because I think we really do so quickly go to thinking everybody sees the world the same way that we do, and that of course that would be the solution. And so yes, over the years we've kind of dabbled around these things. Oh well, but I'm an introvert and I have this friend that's an extrovert and she does things differently than I do. But it's so much deeper than that, because it really is. And I love that you touched on it, Erica, too, that we all bring our past traumas, our past history, our past learning. So it doesn't even have to be trauma, but a lot of us have some trauma that we're bringing into the moment. But it's just our experiences. What was our family like? Where did we grow up culturally? What did we learn and like? And it's so interesting when you start having these conversations with people, because it doesn't have to be things that you wouldn't even think would be at odds. And I was talking to a network member friend about this, and she really loves cities, like walkable cities. And she just said it to me. She's like, but if everybody could live in a walkable city, they would see how amazing it is. And I'm like, no. I'm like, if everybody could live in the woods and see how amazing it is. And so we just laugh about it because we both are so passionate about the things we've learned about ourselves. And I think it ties in with our unschooling journey so well, because that's the environment we want to create, right? Where our kids can learn these things about themselves, have this self-awareness that it took a lot of us a long time to figure out, because I pushed through a lot of things about myself because it didn't maybe fit the mold, And so then it takes time to realize. And so I love that environment where we can learn what we like and don't like, what works for us and doesn't work for us, how we process something, what we need to process something. Do we need quiet? Do we need noise? Do we need headphones? Pam wears headphones and thinks about things. That's amazing to me. I cannot have multiple inputs like that as I'm trying to form a thought, but I love music and headphones, but not for when I'm thinking or working. So just wait. And then just that little piece right there, you can go, oh, my kids are listening to music, but I see them doing something. And for me, before this understanding, I might have gone, they're not doing anything productive. There's no way they could be because they've got headphones on. And then I meet Pam and she's like, I need to have music going or other things happening. And it's like, oh my gosh, how cool. And so what in that little example that I gave, what I want to watch there is my judgment about it, right? I want to watch my judgment about someone else, because if I bring curiosity, then it's like I can learn. Tell me about that. Do you love listening to the music when you're doing it? What are you listening to? What feels the best? And then we connect, so there's so much here.
I love it so much, right? And I think we could think of a million little tiny examples like that, right? Like I'm just thinking, like, with the noise, having just some sounds going on. Like Maya says that same thing. She's like, it's too quiet in here. I just need some sounds going on. And for me, it's the opposite, but it's the same thing in so many different areas. And so I think like one way to kind of approach the curiosity is to do that paradigm shift of there's no one right way. Because if we're stuck in there's like, I figured out the right way, then I could say, here's another just hormonal example. At night, it's cold. That's my experience. In the morning, it is hot. That's also my experience. Now, Josh, he has a completely opposite experience. At night, he is dying of heat. But I could, try to convince him that doesn't make sense. It's cold at night and it gets hot in the morning. And he'd be like, no, that makes no sense. And so realizing that my experience, realizing that what I've learned, from my own life is not the one right way, it just, right, it helps our relationships so much because it helps us to assume positive intent about another person. It helps us to, put their kind of our picture of them into like greater clarity if we can be open and curious about what they're telling us about their own experience rather than going straight to shutting it down by saying, but I have already figured it out and I already know what's right. And so anything from the tiny things of like we're going outside and they're saying they're not hot and I'm saying I am. I mean, this temperature difference is like
it's a big one,
the
and
smallest thing, but it can
Yeah.
cause fights in families, right? Because we think that our experience should be everyone's experience, but you could see that could ripple out to what people should eat, the way that they should have their room organized, how they should be spending their time, what time they should wake up, what time they should eat, or, just every little thing. It's like, what if we could just be curious about how does it feel to you? What is your experience in this area?
Yes, I love that because we can always take because for me sometimes like the hot cold is a great example because that almost feels like a fact.
Right.
It's a fact to us. I'm cold, people. How can you not be cold? There's something wrong with you. And I think that is one of the shifts that helped me was like you were saying, assuming positive intent. They're not trying to judge me just because their answer is different. Like it doesn't make me wrong. I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to get defensive about it. I can be curious about it. It's like, wow, this room feels so different to each of us. And I mean, that is something that we laugh a lot about here because I run very hot and, I no blankets, so nothing at night. And Rock was all like, tucked in. You have them all, dear. But the one I wanted to bring up too, because like examples are just so fun. This was one that was a really useful shift for me when I recognized that, and that was the internal processor and external processor. And I mean, that started even before I had kids, was coming to recognize, oh my gosh, like how different is that? Like somebody wants to talk through it, and they're not telling me what their answer is. They're just telling me a whole bunch of ideas, right? It's like, oh, I don't need to go prep for that. Like, because for me, as an internal processor, for the vast majority of things, I'll think about things, put on my headphones, have a good walk, have a good think. Yeah, this makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. So by the time I mention it to somebody else, it's like, let's do this, right? Whereas for other people, more external processors, they want to hear it. They want to maybe get some reaction. They want to, talk about it with somebody else talk about the 5 different possibilities to eventually kind of land on the one. So, when they come out with something, I have to remember it behooves me to like, save myself from future disappointment or frustration because I went off and did XYZ to get everything ready for the thing. And they're like, oh, yeah, that was yesterday. Like, no.
What was that? Yeah. Right. And I think so. I work with a lot of couples, and oddly enough, many internal processors marry or partner up with external processors. And this is a very new idea to a lot of people. They're always so fascinated when I start to talk about it with them. But the key to this working is not taking it personally. So, what can happen is the internal processor goes off to think about the idea that was presented, and then this partner, whether this is a child or a partner that goes off, is thinking, what? They don't care about me. They don't understand. They don't think this is important. They're not thinking about this, because to them, thinking about an idea and processing it and prioritizing it means talking about it. It means talking about all the iterations, all the different things. And for that internal processor, when they're kind of being bombarded by that, they can feel like, you're not giving me any time. Why are all these ideas coming out? You're all over the board, and then they're taking that personally. But it's like, as soon as we understand this about each other, and again, this is for kids and partners, it's like, oh, okay, I need to give them a little bit of space. I presented them with this idea of what we want to do this weekend, or what's coming up, or do we want to try this as a family? Let's give them some ideas, because then they'll come back, right? Then they'll come back and want to have a conversation, but they need that time. And when I talk to companies about this, it's the same. Like, your employers, you're going to get the best out of your employees when you give them the time to process in the way that they need to process. Like, if we push somebody to do it a different way, we're not going to get their best, because that's the whole point, is that our brains work differently. And I think when we can celebrate that and not take it personally, it just really, really changes things. So that piece of not taking it personally is so important.
Right. Like, don't take someone's personality personally. Is that what people say?
Yeah.
I love that so much. It's like, right. But that was reminding me of just like, I think where some of this can come from, like, if you imagine someone creating a curriculum and they're an external processor, they're going to say, and then the students should externally process about, this is the way that they'll learn. You can see how that would totally happen, where it's like, the way that you learn is by speaking your ideas out loud to someone and having them reflect back what they've heard, And it's like, yeah, for some people that works great. And then for others, that will be so uncomfortable. And so I think, the message that we can kind of learn through that kind of mainstream culture can feel like, sometimes like, okay, we realize that there are differences in people sometimes, but we should try to fix that, or like, we should figure out the best way and, get people to kind of fit into this mold of, whoever is basically in power or in charge, like what makes sense to them. And so I don't know, I just feel like we have like had explorations about all these different personality things, like the Enneagram, Myers-Briggs test, like these different, the Strengths Finder, like all these different things that kind of give us more information about how our own brains work. And I feel like once we see like, oh, there are like, people have come up with these kind of different groupings, and you can read them and be like, oh yeah, I'm not like that at all, but there are some people who are, then it kind of, I don't know, it just expanded like the possibilities in my mind of like, what is okay, what is possible, how people are. And it makes it feel like it's easier to accept other people how they are. And like we were saying earlier, like assuming positive intent about what they do.
Accept other people as they are, and also accept ourselves as we are, because it's like, oh, I keep trying to fix, because everybody talks about how bubbly introverts are just lovely, amazing, and I have bubbly extroverts. And and I have extrovert friends, and also it's like draining. And you absolutely want to do the thing, but you need the recovery time too. And you feel bad about that maybe sometimes. And so seeing how different people can be, helps me like, oh, it's okay for me to just be me. I don't need to fix myself to be these different ways because it's just okay that we all are different. And then
Yeah.
one tool I wanted to bring up that I found really helpful, particularly with my kids, is, there was always this phrase, to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And, I would try to do that. And I found as I was doing that, as my kids left school, they were home more. I was like trying to figure out all this, looking for the learning and the curiosity and what their interests were. And I would find myself putting myself in their shoes. And I'm like, and ABC, I would choose D, and I realized over time that it wasn't so helpful for me to be in their shoes if I was trying to empathize with them, if I was trying to understand their choices. It wasn't helping me understand their choices. So the little flip tool that worked for me was to see things through their eyes. And when I used that language for myself, it helped me remember to go into their brain and to remember what their interests were, to remember their personality pieces, to remember how their brain likes to immerse itself in things and how it processes, like all these people are different pieces. It reminded me to bring their pieces in instead of my pieces, because me stepping into their shoes was just me putting all my personality and brain into that situation. And of course, I'm going to make different choices. But when I could look through their eyes and see what it looked like to them, I came to understand their choices so much better. And so it didn't seem like something out of the blue. It's like, oh, of course that would look interesting. Of course they would make this choice. It just really helped me better understand them. Then I could connect better. I could empathize with them. I could validate. I could support their choices with the understanding that me, being a different person, would make a different choice. But their choice makes complete sense for them. That was a really helpful tool for me to kind of make that distinction.
Right. And I think part of that, and it's kind of what you're describing, but maybe a little bit different, is just it helps us communicate.
Yeah.
So we talk about narration a lot, but I think when we understand these differences, so even if I feel that like I'm having trouble like communicating with someone, and maybe I can't even pinpoint the difference because I'm still kind of locked into how I'm seeing the situation, I can step back and narrate a little bit to go, okay, so I'm not sure if this is how you're seeing it, but here's how it's feeling to me, and here's what I'm thinking I need to do. And it's less threatening than me kind of trying to direct us to do the thing. It's opening up for them to say, oh, wow, like, no, I don't see it that way at all. I really think we need to do this. And then we can have an interesting conversation. But I feel like we can't even get to that place of communicating if we're kind of stuck in our story of there's one right way. And I love that you mentioned that, Erica, because that's the key, right? To know there is never one right way. And even with things that seems like, but what about this? Because like you said, some of these things seem like facts. It's cold. How is that not a fact? Well, bodies are different. And so it isn't a fact. And so I love that piece of just remembering there's not one right way. We all are so different. So I'm going to slow my communication down a little bit. I'm going to say a little bit more about what's happening in my mind, especially with the people I want to be in close relationship with, because they're going to learn more about me. I'm going to learn more about them. And we're going to have a lot less headbutting as we're trying to move towards something because we're slowing that down a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. And right, I think that slowing down is really key because our go-tos are so automatic and so fast. It's very easy to assume we're all there. We're all on the same page. We all got to the same conclusion. You know what I mean? And so I was kind of thinking like it's almost a little bit like it can make you feel uneasy when you start to realize how different someone else who is close to you is from you. You know what I mean? It can feel I think when we first have children, it might feel like they're going to just be little me's, they're going to be like us. And as we start to learn how different they are, I think it can be a challenge, I think, at times. But then like rewriting that story for myself it's not difficult. It's fun and interesting.
Right.
And like, this is really what makes life interesting. It's not about finding people who are exactly precisely like me in every way in order to like have met my match, you know, in order to get along. It's more about like having fun figuring people out and learning about each other and our differences, and just knowing like, you know, just imagining that every person in the world is this complex, unique human being. Like, it's kind of exciting. But yeah, I can sometimes fall in that trap of like, I just want like someone who understands everything about how I am, but it's like, it's too complicated. There's too much, but that's okay. Like, that's just part of the richness of life, that everyone will bring all of their own things to every moment.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it's that shift, right, to getting
Yep.
curious. It's giving ourselves
Mhm.
that space for that shift because, yes, sometimes, and I think that's so much about can be about where we are in the moment too. When things feel overwhelming, oh my gosh, can they just do this way, this one? But when we can take that moment to remember, people are different. And I think it helps too, having worked through it. We've talked about this a lot before. Like you said, how much fun it ends up being, how we end up in places that we on our own could never have imagined. And it's super cool and fun. And my life is richer and my world is wider. And yes, it took some energy. And yes, maybe I don't always have the capacity for it. But when I can do it, it is amazing and it's worth the time to make that shift, to look through their eyes, to get curious about, why doesn't that sound interesting? And knowing the personalities of people are different, because maybe
Right.
you don't ask your child, why is that interesting to you? Because they would take that, it would feel judgmental just in the way that things are phrased. Like our last month in the network, our topic was intentional language, and that just reaches everywhere. Like, because people are different, words mean different things to them. Like, there's so many layers to this.
So many layers. And I'm going to bring the judgment piece back again, because I think it can be when we're feeling judgmental about someone, if we're most likely here, we're talking about our kids or our partner, but really anyone, it's a really great time to pause and say, where's that coming from? Because I would argue that probably a big chunk of the time, it's coming from a belief that they're not doing it the way we would do it. And then when we
Right.
recognize, oh, there isn't the one right way, people are just different. I mean, gosh, letting go of that judgment is so valuable to relationships, because it really is so surprising to the person on the other end, because their way of processing and working has been working for them all these years, and now you're coming in saying it's wrong and passing judgment. It's surprising, and so it can be disconnecting. And so I think it's just so important when those little red flags of like, for me, it's like, am I being frustrated by this conversation, or I'm not understanding something, or I'm passing judgment about something? That's when I want to stop and change that lens, bring this people are different lens, bring that curiosity, because it really just makes such a difference. And I think, when we think about our kids, if we're judging maybe how they're spending their time or how they're moving through their day, this kind of came up with another person not too long ago, where um, I think they were judging the way the kids spent the day because they were thinking what they would do if they had this free environment where they didn't have to go to school, and they were kind of putting their child self in this environment that they had created, thinking, these are all the things that I would do and it would be amazing. And they're not doing any of them. They're over there doing this thing that I don't like at all. And it's like, oh, but this is what they're doing with the freedom. This is what they are being drawn to in this moment. And so, again, when we see ourselves like bringing that judgment lens, it's like, can we let that go and just go, I'm curious about this. I want to understand, and recognize that might be what I would do, but it's not what they're doing. And there's really good reason for that, because we're all so very different.
Yeah, it's like that when well, you should just like any like should, like they should do this, he should do that. That's a really good little, because it pops into
Yeah,
my head all the time. I think it's a
sure.
really natural thing to think because I have good ideas about what I would do. And so then it just feels like, and they should as well. But right, that would be a good red flag to catch. And then I wanted to mention just a little aha moment I had with Josh. So, my husband and I have different personalities. We have a lot in common, but there are a lot of big differences. And so, one of the things he was talking about his frustration with some people at work, and he's just like, people just want to be happy. I don't understand why they're making these choices or whatever. And so his big belief about the world is that all people, their main thing is that they want to be happy. And I was like, okay, but that's your belief about the world. That's not everybody's number one thing is to be happy. People, their number one thing is to make an impact on the world. Some people, their number one thing is to be safe. Like there's so many possible different number one things. But from his perspective, it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would anyone not want the number one thing is to be happy, have fun and be happy, And so it sounds really good to him. And so that was an aha moment, I think, for both of us being like, okay, so that's why like some of these behaviors of other people just make no sense and can be so frustrating. And it also goes a long way to explain why he would make the choices he makes in his life. And so I think that if you're a curious sort of person and interested in diving deeper into these kind of, personality things, like asking those questions of yourself, like what are like those kind of core important things to me? And then just ask other people, like, what are the things for you? Because I just think you'd be really surprised by how different even people who you get along really well with, even people who, like these close relationships, just how different people are.
Yeah. You're right. Speaking of partners, yeah, because it's been forever and it's a very typical, I don't know. Anyway, it's like the way you pack the dishwasher. It's like there's one way. There is one right way. It's like, but this is the most efficient. Like this is the most, and it's so I think it's super fun. Like that's when we've been going back and forth. There's not just one way.
No.
Like, and so if you like it this way and that's super important to you, yeah, I'll keep my hands off it. But the interesting piece, I think, for me too, is just like to open that up for ourselves is to recognize like what feels like I'm doing this the one right way. And then it's like, oh, it ties in with what you're saying, Erica. This is the one right way for me. Why is that? What are those pieces that feel really good when I put this dish here and this dish here? And why do I put knives this way or whatever it is? Like, what is it that's feeling good about the thing that I'm doing that feels good for me? Which then opens up that lens to, oh, like that really aligns with my personality, with who I am as a person, with the way I like to do things. And that helps me recognize through that people are different lens that other people, like some people don't have efficiency at the top of their list.
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
There are just so many different lenses where it doesn't have to be the fastest way. It doesn't have to be like the shiniest way. And that gets us to recognizing the messages too that we've absorbed. The whole cultural productivity, efficiency, like that is the shining gold star that one must shoot for at, throughout anything that you're doing during the day. And it's just so fascinating I think it can be helpful, like for us to kind of observe that in ourselves. That just helps us
Yeah.
like peel it back or knock away a little bit again so that we can recognize it's not just us.
Right. And I think that speaks to what Erica said, where school is kind of trying to force us to that one place. And so I think it's really interesting to actually do some introspection about, okay, is that priority that I've set here really about how my brain works and how I work, or is it what I think I'm supposed to do? Because that's a whole nother layer of it. But right, I love the dishwasher example, and it reminded me of a friend that I mean, this is even hard for me to say these words. Okay, so she would take the dish, like the where the utensils are, and just dump them in the drawer. Like just dumped them all in the drawer. And so like you would just open the drawer and you'd fish around to get out a fork or whatever. Like this is very stressful for me. Like, and I don't feel like I'm overly organized, but I'm like, I want the forks in the fork area. I want the knives in the knife area. But it was so not a priority for her. Like she just was like, but why would you waste your time doing that when you could be doing fun things? I'm guessing she probably has that Josh and David thing, you know, like why when you could be doing fun things? And I'm like, oh, but I don't see it as a waste of time. Like it just doesn't seem like it takes that much time. But again, so this piece of people are different. It is we just prioritize things differently. Like there's just different things, and our priorities can change. There may be a time when there's a lot going on in my life where I really do need some calm, clean surfaces, or I need a little bit less stimulation. And then other times where I'm fine. And so that's where if we can keep that curiosity, we can keep that kind of open communication going, we're not taking it personally, we're not getting frustrated, we're just recognizing that we're all so different.
Yeah. And just how fast is it to just dump that silverware in there? Like that's really the fastest way.
Exactly.
It hadn't even occurred to me, but that is incredibly much faster than what I do. It's so funny. But
she's
right,
like
if
never
the
had
partner wants to
problems.
be
Right.
But if you do have the partner who wants to be super organized, like I fall into the trap sometimes of being like, he's doing that because he doesn't like me, because he doesn't care about my feelings is why he does it that way. You know what I mean? So that's the taking it extremely personally. So I could be like, oh my gosh, she's dumping all that silverware in there because she doesn't care at all about how I feel about the drawer, you know? But it's like, no, it's just, it doesn't
even occur to her. Right. It just doesn't occur to her.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right. So how fun is this? And so that's, I think, is a fun example to kind of end on, in that it is fun to think about all the different ways that we're different and all the different ways that we prioritize things, and that it isn't saying something about someone else. It's only saying something about us. And so when we can stay there, gosh, it just really revolutionizes all the relationships.
All the relationships. It really does, because then you can like embrace, and celebrate somebody else's way of doing things and choices that they make without like feeling like you're wrong or that it says something about you. It's like, this is so you, and that's amazing. And I'm so excited that you're discovering this and exploring, expressing, like whatever it is, whether it's through actions, choices, dress, like everything. And then it's just like, where I go back to like, we're all human beings and we're each one of us different, and just keep peeling back those layers, because every time something's like, people are different. Let's tap that for a little bit and see where does that lead me, because it leads beautiful places, doesn't it?
It really does. So I'm excited for people to take this lens and kind of see what happens. So leave us some comments, reach out. And I just appreciate the two of you so much. I love talking about these ideas with you and thinking about all the different ways that it is valuable in our lives. And if you listening love these conversations, we really would love to have you at the Living Joyfully Network. We have a lot of fun conversations and so many aha moments, and it just fills me up so much. So you can find a link for that under the community tab at livingjoyfullyshop.com. And so thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay. Have a great day.
See you all later. Bye-bye.